consider as laid upon the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2600, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2600, a bill to amend the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act to clarify how the act applies to condominiums.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? The members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
It's a bill that would make changes to the Disclosure Act, the Property Disclosure Act, relating to the sale of condominiums. It's a 5-minute vote. One more 5-minute vote on the journal, the proceedings of the previous day, and that's next. And the House will move on to a general debate on a bill that would authorize a land trade between the federal government and Resolution Copper involving land tracts in Arizona. An hour of general debate and several amendments to be considered on that bill. Off the floor, we mentioned the House Republican Conference met today. Reporting on that, Matt Fuller of CQ writes that Speaker Boehner signaled today that the House would not simply vote on the version of the continuing resolution the Senate sends back, running up against a timeline that could suggest at least a temporary government shutdown. CQ says, asked if he would now accept a, quote, clean CR from the Senate to avoid a government shutdown. The Ohio Republican was plain-spoken, quote, I do not see that happening. That's from the briefing we began to show you a few minutes ago, and you can watch all of that in our video library at cspan.org. The debate on the CR continues in the Senate. You can watch live coverage of that on C-SPAN 2 as they close yesterday. Leader Reid proposed a couple of amendments to the CR, which would shorten the length of it from 3 months to 2 months through November the 15th, and would also strip away the defunding language that the House version passed last Friday.
The yeas are 410, the nays are 0, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to consider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20 of the unfinished business, the question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing for what purpose does the gentleman from Washington
Speaker
rise?
asks for the yeas and nays.
Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair is aye. The gentleman from
Mr.
Washington
Speaker.
requests the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise, a sufficient number having arisen. The yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
It's the last recorded vote in this series. This is on the journal, the previous day's written record. House will move on after this to the bill that would authorize a land swap between the federal government and Resolution Copper involving land tracts in Arizona. This is a 5-minute vote, and that debate next, an hour of general and several amendments to be considered. Over on the Senate side, they are have been debating the continuing resolution that was passed by the House last week, continuing funding the federal government through December the 15th. The end of the fiscal year is next Tuesday. The bill would also defund the health care law, with the health care exchanges set to go into effect October the 1st, also next Tuesday. Meanwhile, Democratic leader Harry Reid in the Senate yesterday introduced 2 amendments to the Senate version, which would shorten the length of the CR to 2 months and would strip away the defunding language. Republicans met this morning, the Republican conference in the House, and Republican leaders spoke to reporters after. The National Journal's Tim Alberto reports that Speaker Boehner attempted this morning to sell House Republicans on a debt ceiling plan that would delay the implementation of Obamacare, jumpstart the Keystone Pipeline, and introduce other conservative reforms in hopes of uniting the GOP conference ahead of tough votes on the continuing resolution and the debt ceiling. But, writes National Journal, reaction from members was mixed at best. That's from the National Journal. Last vote here and general debate ahead on the Arizona land bill.
On this vote, the yeas are 260, the nays are 137, with 2 members present. The journal is approved. Purpose, the gentleman from Washington rise.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill H.R. 687.
Without objection. Pursuant to House Resolution 351 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House and the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 687. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the consideration of H.R. 687, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to facilitate the efficient extraction of mineral resources in southeast Arizona by authorizing and directing an exchange of federal and non-federal land and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, and the gentleman from Arizona, Ms. Grijalva, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington, and the House will be in order. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 687, the Southeast Arizona Land Exchange and Conservation Act. As our nation continues to suffer from high unemployment, a rising national debt, and annual deficits, Congress's top priority should be advancing solutions that have put Americans back to work and help to strengthen and grow the economy. The bill before us does just that. Mr. Chairman, the House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. The gentleman's correct. The House is not in order. Please remove your conversations off the floor to the cloakroom or the Speaker's lobby, please. The committee. Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the Southeast Arizona Land Exchange and Conservation Act, sponsored by our colleague and Natural Resources Committee member, Mr. Gosar from Arizona, is a bipartisan measure that will create thousands of new American jobs and boost our economy through U.S. increased mineral production. The bill authorizes an equal value land exchange between Resolution Copper and the federal government that will open up the 3rd largest undeveloped copper resource in the world. The bill requires that the cost of the land exchange be fully paid for by the mine developer, Copper Resolution in this case, ensuring that there will be fair treatment, therefore, for taxpayers. This project will provide substantial benefits to the United States and the state of Arizona in the form of job creation, economic growth, and for the United States, increased national security. The mining project is estimated to support 3,700 new jobs. These are good-paying, family-wage American jobs that will equate to more than $220 million in annual wages. At a time when our economy continues to struggle, this mining project will provide a much-needed boost through private investment. This mining activity will have over a $60 billion economic impact and will generate an estimated $20 billion in total federal, state, county, and local tax revenue through the life of the project. This bill is a perfect example of how safely and responsibly harnessing our resources will generate revenue and get our economy back on track. The importance of U.S. Copper production cannot be overstated. Our nation has become increasingly reliant on foreign countries for our mineral resources, placing our economic competitiveness and national security at risk. The U.S. currently imports 30% of the copper we need, and we will continue to be dependent on foreign countries if we fail to develop our own resources right here at home. The copper produced from this single project is estimated to meet 25% of the United States' entire copper demand. This copper could be used for a variety of items ranging from medical devices, plumbing, computers, and even, Mr. Chairman, hybrid cars. It's also essential for our national defense equipment and technology, including satellites, space and aviation, and weapons guidance and communication systems. The benefits and reasons to pass this bill are plentiful. However, we are likely to hear several inaccurate claims from those who are opposed to mining in the United States. I would like to take a moment to set the record straight right from the beginning. First, this bill follows the standard federal land appraisal process procedures issued by the Department of Justice, which has been in use for decades. The appraisal requires full market value to be paid for both the land and the minerals located within the land. If by chance there is a copper production beyond the appraised value, the mine developer will be required to pay the United States the difference, and this, Mr. Chairman, will be assessed annually. This is an added guarantee to ensure that taxpayers get a fair return for these copper resources. Second, as I mentioned earlier, this bill is about creating nearly 3,700 American jobs. It's not about helping foreign mining interests at home, as some have charged. Opposing this mine and not producing copper in the U.S. is what truly benefits foreign nations by sending American jobs overseas and making us increasingly reliant on foreign sources of critical minerals. And finally, the bill requires full compliance with environmental laws and tribal consultation prior to constructing the mine. This bill provides more conservation and protection of culturally sensitive, riparian, and critical habitat than otherwise would occur. This bill does not, Mr. Chairman, does not waive any existing laws or protections for sacred sites under federal law. It upholds the Native American Graves Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, and the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. It will not allow the desecration of any sacred sites. But it does, Mr. Chairman, specifically and permanently protect a site called the Apache Leap that is well known and special to Arizonians and the area tribes. H.R. 687 is about creating new American jobs, strengthening our economy, and decreasing our dependence on foreign minerals. The bill has broad support from over 50 local and national organizations and governmental entities, including Arizona Governor Jan Brewer. The Arizona Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturing, and National Mining Association all support this bill. Furthermore, the Arizona Republic Editorial Board has endorsed this bill. They highlighted the bipartisan support from the Arizona congressional delegation and noted, and I quote, "It has the potential to be an economic bonanza for our state and national security boon to our country," end quote. So I strongly urge my colleagues to support this bill to put Americans back to work and end our dependency on foreign minerals. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I rise to oppose H.R. 687. And at a time when the majority of this Congress has...
Time as you may consume.
Thank you, Mr. At a time when this majority of the Congress is bringing our nation, has brought our nation to the brink of potential shutdown, a looming hardship and economic crisis with regards to the debt ceiling, no progress on the jobs plan, no progress on immigration reform. Here we are today debating a sweetheart piece of legislation that hurts taxpayers and comforts, yes, a foreign multinational mining corporation. One has to wonder about what the priorities for this Congress really are. We have seen at least 5 different legislative versions of this legislation over the past 10 years. Originally filed in the 109th as H.R. 2681, sponsored by our former colleague from Arizona, Congressman Renzi. That version begat H.R. 3301 in the 110th Congress by our colleague, Congressman Pastor. That begat H.R. 2509 on the 111th Congress by Congresswoman Kirkpatrick. And then that begat in the 112th H.R. 1904 by my friend from Arizona, Congressman Gosar, which begat this present version, H.R. 687 in the 113th, again sponsored by my colleague, Mr. Gosar. If the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, we all might need to spend some time getting our heads examined. H.R. 687 facilitates a land exchange so that a subsidiary of two foreign-owned multinational mining companies can build a massive block cave copper mine on federal land set aside by President Eisenhower for recreation in 1955. The town of Superior has been torn apart by this legislation. The city attorney issued a legal opinion that Section 9 of this bill, which was stripped during the markup process, was not something the town could legally approve. The opinion raised grave concerns about the financial obligations of the town and that they would be under if they accepted arrangements with Resolution Copper as it was written. The town was willing to negotiate with Resolution Copper, but the company demanded support of the legislation as any precondition to further talks. They also stated rather flatly that there would be no additional money coming to Superior from Resolution Copper from any negotiations. Resolution Copper continues to oppose any requirement of filing a mining plan of operation before this legislation is passed. It's been 10 years since this project was proposed, and we still have no mining plan. The community has been driven by boom and bust promises of mining companies for decades. Retired miners have become accustomed to losing their pensions that they earned in contract negotiations from mining corporations, especially when dealing with foreign entities. This is not an economic miracle waiting to happen. Even if the town were to reverse its position, the legal and political issues that have been raised cannot be ignored. The town, climbing and environmental organizations, and Native American nations will be severely impacted by this trade, particularly when the mine is built. Resolution Copper, after 10 years of pushing and pushing, has yet to acknowledge those impacts. There are just too many unanswered questions and shortcuts. Opposition to the bill from the community that will impact the most is a clear indication that the process needs to start over, but Superior's withdrawal of support is just one of many red flags. All Native American nations in Arizona overwhelmingly oppose the bill. The Intertribal Council of Arizona and the National Congress of American Indians have both passed resolutions in opposition. Their strong opposition stems from the outright violation of the consultation protocol that mandates advanced, informed, and appropriate government-to-government consultation with Indian tribes, nations, and communities. H.R. 687 trades away federal lands that contain significant cultural resources without complying with NEPA. This means that there will be no environmental review or formal consultations with affiliated tribal governments before the land becomes private property. I repeat, before the land becomes private property. The sponsor's insistence to postpone environmental review until after the land exchange is one of the main reasons local support for this bill has eroded. Once the land is exchanged, as mandated by the bill, there is no guarantee a full EIS under NEPA will occur. That means no independent hydrology study to assess impacts of local water resources. That means no mining plan of operation and independent jobs and economics report. That means no objective appraisal of the lands to be exchanged. We're stuck relying on the company's numbers to guesstimate the value added to the American taxpayer. That doesn't seem like a good deal to me, no matter what way you look at it. I was astounded that the majority decided to shield the company from testifying at the hearing held on this bill. We all would have benefited greatly from the ability to hear from Resolution Copper on the record about their support for the bill, the validity of their economic study, the lack of a mining plan of operations, the lack of an independent hydrology study associated with a real mining plan of operations, and the negligent disregard for NEPA standards and Native American tribal consultation processes. How is the House expected to make an informed decision on this deeply controversial bill when the Committee of Jurisdiction didn't even bother to question the owners and proponents, Resolution Copper. This doesn't make sense to me and to a great deal of people. All we know about the proposed mine is purely speculative and comes from data and reports produced by Resolution Copper itself. And the common refrain from supporters to trust without validation, don't worry, it'll all work out. Those are not the due diligence requirements that this Congress has on a major land exchange as we are facing today. The number of jobs they claim the project will create is a moving target. The number is always changing. At one point, the company claimed the mine would create 5,000 jobs. The last estimate on their website project the mine will support 1,400 direct jobs through the life of the mine. Again, these numbers come from a study conducted by Resolution Copper and are not supported by a mining plan of operation. Until we have a plan, there's really no way to know. The numbers tossed around by the majority come from a study that assumed the mine would produce the same amount of copper and support the same amount of jobs year after year for its entire 50-year lifespan. We know this won't be the case. Mining operations react to market demand. One number not tossed around by the proponents of 687 is royalties for the extraction of this very valuable mineral on federal land. Royalties to deal with remediation, to deal with any mitigation might need to occur after the fact, and to deal with some level of return to the American taxpayer. The boom and bust cycles of mining's history can't be washed away with a public relations document masquerading as an economic study that assumes the very best and brushes aside any reality. Construction of this mine will benefit two large foreign corporations. It will not diversify the local economy or even guarantee any real jobs for the local people in the area. It will, on the other hand, diminish recreation value of the area, jeopardize the availability of water, and threaten a sacred site, all for cents on the dollar. 687 is not in the best interest of the American taxpayer, and I urge my colleagues to oppose this reckless, expedited land exchange. A wolf in sheep's clothing, regardless, is still a wolf. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm very pleased to yield 5 minutes to the author of this legislation, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Hastings. I appreciate the House spending time to consider this important jobs legislation this week. My home state of Arizona is known for its 5 C's: cattle, citrus, climate, cotton, and ultimately copper. People have been digging in Arizona for precious metals like copper for centuries. In the 1850s, nearly 1 in every 4 people in Arizona were miners. Without a doubt, miners fueled the growth that makes Arizona the state it is today. Today, the Arizona mining industry is alive, but it's not what it used to be. Nevertheless, a wide array of other minerals such as copper, coal, uranium, lime, and potash are mined throughout my district. These projects employ hundreds of my constituents with high-paying jobs, jobs that pay over $50,000 to $60,000 a year plus benefits. In rural Arizona, those types of jobs are few and far between. Rural Arizonans recognize the major benefits this project will bring to our region and our state, which is why it is one of the first initiatives brought to my attention when I came to Congress. The Southwest Arizona Land Exchange and Conservation Act is a bill that protects important environmentally sensitive lands in the state and opens up over 3,700 jobs at Resolution Copper Mine. My legislation is a result of years of negotiation and compromise that achieves a careful balance between conservation and resource utilizations, and Arizonans just want Congress to get it done. That is why my colleague on the other side of the aisle, Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick, and I came together at the beginning of this Congress and jointly introduced this legislation. In fact, just last week, the largest paper in the state of Arizona, the Arizona Republic, issued an op-ed on House consideration of our bill. In the column entitled "Stop Dawdling on Resolution Copper," the editorial board stated, "Congress needs to get this done. A copper mine proposed near Superior is a winner. It has bipartisan support from Arizona's congressional delegation, and how often does that happen? It also has the potential to be an economic bonanza for our state and a national security boom to our country. The proposal has been around so long it has old-timer status in Arizona. Congressional approval is overdue for the land swap necessary to make this happen. I guess that says it all. Our bill is a win-win for Arizona. That is why it has strong bipartisan support in Arizona and across the nation. That support includes Arizona Governor Jan Brewer, 4/5 of the highly polarized Arizona State Legislature, nearly every municipal government in central and southern Arizona, national business interests like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the general contractors, the truckers, and the manufacturers, and conservation organizations like the Sonoran Institute and the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. Why so much buzz about this project, you ask? It's called jobs, jobs, and jobs. Upon passage of the bill, Resolution Copper estimates it will be able to employ nearly 3,000 workers during a 6-year construction period, and that's just the start. The mine, given the company's mine plan of operation, when it complies with all environmental laws, will directly employ around 1,400 people. These are high-paying jobs ranging from $40,000 to $120,000 salaries per year in a region that is struggling economically. As many people familiar with the mining communities know, an influx of over 1,000 mining jobs will spur additional economic growth in a community. These mine workers need to eat at restaurants, convenience stores to shop at, and homes to live in. A recent economic study estimates an additional 2,300 jobs would be created due to these demands. That brings the estimated total number of permanent jobs resulting from this legislation to about 3,700. Overall, the independent analysis estimates that the total economic impact of the project will be around $61 billion. That is over $1 billion per year over the life of the mine, which equates to over $19 billion in federal, state, county, and local tax revenue. $19 billion in tax revenue. In these tough times, tough fiscal times, I think we can all agree that local governments and certainly the U.S. Treasury could use those funds. This legislation also has national security implications. The U.S. currently imports 30% of its copper, and its demand is skyrocketing. This critical mineral is used in virtually all modern-day technology, ranging from renewable energy and hybrid cars to your everyday electronics like cell phones and iPods. Our country must use our domestic resources to meet this growing demand, and this project, as listed earlier, could yield enough copper to meet 25% of our current demand. This legislation is not only a jobs bill, it's a conservation bill. The lands the federal government acquire in the exchange are highly coveted recreational and conservation lands. It protects one of the few remaining undammed rivers in Arizona, the San Pedro River. The Dripping Springs property is a superb hiking and climbing location. The Cave Creek property will protect a riparian corridor as well as numerous archaeological sites, and nearly 100 acres of private land adjacent to the culturally...
I yield the gentleman an additional minute.
Gentleman is recognized for an additional minute.
Land adjacent to the culturally important Apache Leap is being placed into federal stewardship. This proposal truly has bipartisan support on the ground in our state and across the country. We can preserve lands that advance the public interest and objectives of protecting wildlife habitat, cultural and historical resources, while enabling development of a project that will generate significant economic and employment opportunities for state and local residents. I hope it will garner your support. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 687, the Southeast Arizona Land Exchange and Conservation Act, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman continues to reserve. Gentleman from Arizona.
I would like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yield as much time as the gentleman consumes. The ranking member of the Resources Committee, Congressman DeFazio.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
Thank my friend and colleague for yielding that time. Well, another day, another giveaway. Pretty ironic. Here we are. We're about to get into a massive fight over whether or not we should increase the debt limit of the United States or default on our obligations, which involves many trillions of dollars. And today, we're going to give away a taxpayer asset that is worth billions of dollars. We're going to give it away. Oh, we're going to get some pretty land in exchange. Pretty land in exchange. That's valuable. That's nice. But you know, for many billions of dollars, we could probably buy a lot more land if we wanted it, or we could have a little debt reduction. I had a simple amendment. My amendment would have said that we would charge an 8% royalty, 8% of the value of the copper coming from these publicly owned lands would be paid to the Treasury in the United States of America. And guess what? The Republicans didn't allow the amendment. What are they afraid of? They're afraid that maybe some of their Tea Party types over there might vote for it. You want to run government like a business? Don't give away assets. That's what we're doing here. You'd still get the jobs. Now, you know, this bill contains a sort of a bizarre, they're saying, oh, we're going to get some money, maybe, sort of, kind of, except Treasury, nobody can interpret the language of this bill. It's a rather unique and very speculative potential future possible payment scheme which would be controlled entirely by the company using proprietary information. Of course they're going to volunteer to pay money. Yeah, I don't think so. It's not going to happen. So we're going to trade away a multi-billion-dollar asset for a few thousand acres of recreation land. I would say on any other day I wouldn't hear from the Republican side of the aisle that that was a good idea. Give away billions of dollars of federal assets for some recreation lands. Now, this isn't about the surface. It's just about the fact that Rio Tinto, a foreign corporation, is not going to pay anything or very little for the value of the minerals that are extracted from this land. In fact, I understand that they pretty much stopped any other exploration around the world because this is the richest copper lode in North America, one of the richest in the world, and they don't want to go to these other piddly places where they've been, Indonesia, Australia, and all that. They're just focusing all their energy for copper right here. And guess where the copper is going to go after it's mined and after they don't pay anything to us for taking it out of the ground? It's going to go to China. Foreign corporation, ship it to China. Yeah, we'll get some jobs. You know, and if they paid a royalty, we'd still get the jobs, and we would make the taxpayers whole. Now, the oil and gas industry pays 12.5% royalty to the government for the value of the resources they extract. Why shouldn't the mining industry pay? Well, they don't pay because we're operating under an 1872 law signed by Ulysses S. Grant. That's what governs mining here. Now, come on. It's time to update that law, and if they don't want to update the law, they could at least begin to charge some royalties for the extraction of these minerals. We've given away billions of dollars of gold mines to foreign corporations, platinum, everything. Now we're going to give away our greatest copper resource to a foreign corporation with no royalties, no charge. And, you know, they'll shelter most of their earnings overseas. They won't pay little, if anything, in U.S. taxes. Yes, their employees will pay taxes. That's where they go, oh, they'll pay taxes. Yeah, of course, we're going to extract that out of the employees. But the company isn't going to pay. They'll find a way to shelter that overseas. It's a foreign corporation. This is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. Then there are the issues regarding the environmental waivers and the other things that, Mr. Grijalva talked about. We're going to evaluate this after the asset is transferred to the mining company. And we're going to, you know, then the mining company will someday, you know, go through this bizarre speculative scheme, and they might pay us something in the future. Let's have a plain and simple and fair 8% royalty, make the taxpayers whole, and run this government like a little bit more responsibly, guys.
Gentleman continues to reserve. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to yield 3 minutes to another gentleman from Arizona, our colleague, Mr. Salmon. 3 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. You've already heard that this is a very bipartisan measure that is supported by people on both sides of the aisle. In fact, I'd like to point out a little story that I think is kind of interesting. I think Mr. Gosar might be a little embarrassed, and his partner on the other side of the aisle in getting this through, Ann Kirkpatrick. But I think it's really interesting to note that Mr. Gosar beat Ms. Kirkpatrick in a campaign a few years ago. Yet they were able to put all differences aside to come together for what's best for the state, what's best ultimately for the nation. We're talking about 3,700 jobs. Every town hall meeting that I've held this year, and I think the same thing could be said for most folks in this body on both sides of the aisle. The number one issue that keeps coming up is jobs, jobs, jobs. People want to get back to work again. Arizona was hit really hard by this Great Recession, and the prospect of getting 3,700 jobs in our state for this great project that's going to provide 25% of the copper for this country is phenomenal. And that's why the Arizona Republic, our largest state's newspaper, came out and editorialized for it. That's why you're seeing all these different entities that really are on both sides of the aisle coming out in support of this idea. I really find it incredulous that as we try to balance the budget, we try to start whittling down the deficit, stop having to pay a third of our debt to China, that we have folks on the other side of the aisle that are not willing to either cut spending or create jobs. I find that incredulous. This is a phenomenal opportunity. It's a win-win all the way across the board, and what I think a lot of our young people would call a no-brainer. I would like to really commend the other gentleman from Arizona, Representative Paul Gosar, for his undying support and his incredible hard work to get this done, and I commend his colleague on the other side of the aisle, Ann Kirkpatrick, for her great work on this. I also want to just say in closing that this is extremely important to the folks in Arizona. It's been going on since I left Congress the first time, and that was 12 years ago. It's time to put this to bed. And honestly, it has passed the House on several occasions, and it gets all caught up in the Senate. I think we got the opportunity to get it done this year. I think common sense will prevail, and I'd like to, again, compliment the gentleman from Arizona for his great work. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think the senator, great Senator Moynihan, once said that people are entitled to their own opinions, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And fact, allowing the immediate exploration on and under Oak Flat prior to NEPA review contemplated in Section 4J of the Act will constitute an irretrievable commitment of resources. That is part of what is already in the legislation. What's also in the legislation is Section 4C of H.R. 687 that requires consultation only after enactment of the Act, making any consultation with Native communities a mere formality. And Secretary Visak said it prior in written comments. It is important that this bill engage in a process of formal tribal consultation to ensure both tribal participation and the protection of the sacred sites. This is his principal concern with regard to 687, and that's why it did not receive the support of the department. I mention those things because they're part of the legislation. And this legislation was written for the convenience of the company and to facilitate a trade that at the end of the day offers not only any benefit, but circumvents any protections we have to deal with intended and unintended consequences. With that, if I may, Mr. Chairman, yield 2 minutes to Congressman Kildee for his comments. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, my friend Mr. Grijalva, for your leadership and for yielding the time. I rise in strong opposition to this bill. I have consulted with many Native American tribes, including the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, which I represent. This bill simply does not rise to the standard that allows me to support it. I've talked to the tribes. Their concern is that the bill does not adequately support the protection of sacred lands, nor does it adequately confer with Native Americans on these critical issues. And the gentleman mentioned that the two co-sponsors of this legislation have set aside their differences, and I have great respect for both members that offer this legislation, and it's commendable that they have set aside their differences. Unfortunately, what this bill does is also set aside the objections of the Native American tribes of this nation, of this country, who object to the bill. It's bad for a couple of reasons. One, it waives NEPA protections that require mining companies to publicly disclose the environmental impacts they'll create, including on our water resources. Second, basically this bill provides a multi-billion-dollar giveaway to a foreign mining conglomerate that is engaged in mining uranium in Iran. Third, this bill would potentially destroy sacred and religious lands. I know something firsthand about the importance of preserving sacred tribal sites. When I was the president of the Genesee County Land Bank back home in Flint, Michigan, we discovered sacred ancestral remains on a work site. Instead of simply continuing on the project, as many would have had us do, we did the right thing. We stopped the development, worked with local and tribal officials, identified and protected the sacred remains, and returned the land to the Saginaw Chippewa tribe. The federal government has a legal and trust responsibility to Indian tribes and to protect and preserve sacred tribal lands, and we should take that role very seriously. I suggest and implore my colleagues to oppose this bill. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm very pleased to yield 3 minutes to the subcommittee chairman on the Natural Resources Committee that deals with this issue, Mr. Lamborn.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the chairman of the full committee, Representative Hastings, for his leadership on this and many other resources issues. And I want to thank the sponsors of the bill and particularly point out to the American people that Representative Gosar has been working night and day on this issue for years. It's an amazing to me sign of his dedication to his district and the people of Arizona that's brought this bill to where it's at right now. It's taken a lot of work and dedication, and I admire that as I witness it. A lot has been said about the good that will come to Arizona, the 3,700 well-paying jobs. But I want to talk about the good that's going to come to America. Copper is the second most needed defense material that the Department of Defense has. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and I'm sensitive to making sure that our men and women in uniform have the best weapons and supplies that they can have. And the DoD says that copper is the second most necessary mineral to meeting the needs of the military. The first happens to be aluminum. Also, this is the third most rich site of copper in the entire world, in my understanding. And it would supply up to 1/4 of this nation's copper needs. And we're right now importing 30% of our needs. So it almost wipes out our trade deficit in copper. Copper is a critical metal, and if you want to have a growing economy, you've got to have copper. So I just want to say this is good for America. It's good to have this resource, and it's good for the jobs that it produces in Arizona. And finally, I'm just going to conclude by saying it amazes me when I hear people who profess to be for the working families, the working men and women of this country, stumble over a golden opportunity like this that would create thousands of great jobs, and they just throw it away. And I would urge that we not listen to them. We look at the good that comes from this bill and the resource and the jobs that this would produce and the good that it does to our national economy, including our defense industry. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Arizona.
Before I yield to my colleague from Utah, it should be noted that 1/14 of 1% is the impact copper has on the Arizona economy. It used to be 4% about 10, 15 years ago. Conversely, $421 million annually is spent in Pinal County and the surrounding area around Oak Flats and Apache Leap in terms of ecotourism and visitorship revenue. With that, let me yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Matheson.
The gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, thank you, and I thank Mr. Grijalva for his generosity in yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 687, the Southeast Arizona Lands Exchange and Conservation Act. Copper is such a critical part of our economy. It's used in electronics, plumbing, cars, renewable energy, and yet according to the latest data from the U.S. Geological Survey, the United States remains a net importer of copper, with over 1/3 of copper consumed in this country coming from foreign sources. This piece of bipartisan legislation offers us a chance to develop one of the largest undeveloped copper resources in the world. It's estimated that once fully developed, this project will produce enough copper annually to meet 25% of U.S. demand. It will create 3,500 high-paying jobs. Average income in this industry is over $65,000. This has been the product of a lengthy stakeholder negotiation process. It's been supported by local elected officials of both parties. I commend Mr. Gosar for his leadership on this issue and working with Congresswoman Kirkpatrick as well, and I urge passage of this bill. I'll yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, I'll reserve my time.
The gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chairman, talk a little bit about the proponents' claim that 687 will boost the U.S. economy. The copper will likely benefit China more than the United States. 9% of the parent company, Rio Tinto, of Resolution Copper is owned by the state-controlled Aluminum Corporation of China. Rio Tinto has a long-established partnership to supply copper to China. They have repeatedly stated, and at a hearing, refused to say what percentage of the copper generated from federal lands would be retained and processed in the United States. They will continue to market and supply their mined copper and other ores to meet the greatest needs. And at this point, Rio Tinto's own International Copper Study Group forecast a 377-ton global shortage this year alone, driven not by U.S. demand, but by that of China. The bill does not even require that the ore extracted from this mine be processed in the United States, much less marketed or sold here. And our time when our focus should be on supporting U.S. industry, maintaining jobs. We should not trade away billions and billions of dollars and tonnage of copper to supply China's ever-growing need. I also would like to point out another issue that my friend from that Mr. Congressman Kildee pointed out. At one point, we have continued to inquire a very important inquiry that has not been finalized or formalized, and that is the parent company in violation of the resolution by this Congress and by previous Congress on sanctions against Iran because of their development of potential weapons, nuclear weapons. Any company doing business with was not to be able to do business with the United States. Rio Tinto co-manages in partnership a mine in a uranium mine of all things in Namibia in Africa, and I think that merits we look into it before we're in violation of our own resolution, and more importantly, that we are not violating a resolution that we passed. It is an issue of asking Commerce and Treasury, who are responsible for that sanction enforcement, to do so, and I think it would satisfy many of us to know the results of that, and it would satisfy the American people to know that their resource, a shared taxpayer resource, copper on federal land, is not in violation of sanctions resolution by this Congress against Iran. With that, let me reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves.